Hey guys, so today I thought I would talk about my nightmare with regards to adding wiggly text to my text system and how sometimes creating something really simple that you think will only take a few minutes to add turns into a 1 or 2 day event of chasing after a bug, and sometimes longer depending on what you're creating. So, first of all, I thought I would explain my text system so that as we go through each problem, you get an idea of what's going wrong and where it's happening. So, first, let's go through how the text works. So, first, there is code to create a substring with a counter that increases the length of the substring every few frames. This creates a typewriter effect. So if the full text is hello world and the substring increases every few frames, it looks like this on screen as it counts up. And then that substring gets passed to a while loop that types out each character of the substring and checks if there's a text modifier to make that text a different color or make the text move, fancy things like that. So here is a basic but not super accurate construction of said code. So there is a while loop that goes through each letter of the substring. So it actually is drawing each letter individually. And then there is some code to check for a text modifier. So if a bracket is found, then it'll change the text modifier. Each modifier number has a certain effect, and I'll just use the word instead of the number to simplify the reading of the code. The next part makes a copy of the current letter that the while loop is on for drawing purposes, so it can draw that letter. Then it checks the text modifier and draws the text in whatever way matches the text modifier. There's several of these, one for each modifier, so there are many ways to draw text. The next part increases the letter count so it can go through the full amount of text, so we don't just have an endless while loop. And then there is code to increase draw X and draw Y to account for the spacing between letters so that the letters don't just all draw on top of each other. Now, I was adding more types of text because I thought, oh yeah, you know what, we could do with a little bit more in the way of expressiveness, and I would like to add just a few different things that I could throw into cutscenes and something that would make it feel more expressive when characters talk. So one of the text modifiers I decided to add was a wiggle text function for that kind of nice wavy up and down text. So I thought this should be fairly simple. I could use a sine wave. So the following code is what I came up with basically to try and create that simple wiggle. Now, from here on, I'm going to go through each problem in order. So let's start. Problem number 1. Wiggle going at different speeds when typing versus fully typed. So the wiggle would go up and down, and then relax out at normal up and down speed once it had actually finished typing. So I had a sine wave that was going up and down and a counter that was increasing to represent the time, basically for the sine wave, so that it would go up and down with the time. And the thing is, I had it inside of the while loop, inside of the case in the while loop to be specific. So it was like while and modifier, oh, wiggly text, okay, we're going to make a sine wave. And the problem is that I was counting up the sine counter inside of this as well. So in my head, what was going right was, okay, yeah, we've got this sine wave going up and down when I put certain numbers into it. When I put other numbers into it, for say the frequency, the intensity of the wave, it doesn't seem to actually work right. My problem is I didn't realize I was dealing with absolutely random numbers that just happened to look like they might have been doing the right thing, and my code wasn't actually working at all in the way I thought it should. So more on that as we go through the problems. So my first attempt to try and fix this, I think I was just trying random stuff and my brain was all over the place. Clearly, looking back, was trying to move where the timer changes. So I took it outside of the text modifier statement of if the text modifier is a wiggle, and I put it outside of that. I don't know why I thought that changed anything because functionally it's the same thing and it doesn't actually fix anything about how the timer goes up. The timer is still taking big jumps between frames for a lovely uneven animation. And the second thing I did was I tried to make the while loop go through all of the text because I thought that would fix the fact that the timer was going up in uneven amounts because the wiggle would happen much faster as the substring went through. And then when the substring was fully typed, so the substring was the same as the text, it would basically wiggle at a normal pace. The problem with this was I didn't want it to type out all of the text immediately, so I did actually have to add an if statement then. This didn't actually really fix the whole problem. It was a duct tape solution for a partial problem that was just very surface level. So as you can see, this is where things start to get overcomplicated looking and silly and unfunctional, basically. So next problem that shows up. The wiggle was going at different speeds for different text. And then I only realized that was happening when I started implementing it into cutscenes because I was using one piece of text to test this on, which is a terrible idea. And then I thought, okay, I'm varying the sign loop by the text length. That's why that's not working. So, but then I realized the real problem. So essentially what was happening looked a little bit like this. So where the last letter ends is essentially where the time variable ends on this frame, and therefore where it starts on the next frame. And the next frame looks completely different to the first frame and doesn't create a nice wiggle because of this. So this is how it looks animated between those two frames. So what I should have done is I should have had two counters. One that resets each time the while loop finishes, and one that goes up with time. The one that resets each time the while loop finishes serves the purpose of moving that sine wave up and down, whilst the time counter serves as a way of shifting that time a little bit forward each time. So it's not a complete jump between frames. So the nice random numbers I was putting in that worked were only working because they happened to look like they were working and they weren't really working at all. So I reset the sign counter to 0 and I created an additional counter that actually went up with time with each few frames, so that this means that when I have my nice sine loop that starts, the second time I have the sine loop, I can say, oh, start from here, but one along. So it's just at the next step when it starts. So it creates that little wiggle that happens each step. I don't know why I didn't do this all out on paper, so I did that to begin with. But anyways, actually in the middle of saying, oh, I've fixed the problem, I discovered that after a few seconds, only the first letter wiggled. I am not sure why this happened, but I figured a way to fix it. Anyways, I amn't a big fan of having ever increasing counters. So with the increase counter that I now had, when it got back to kind of full circle, which is any multiple of pi, I essentially set it back to 0. And this seems to stop the wiggle from stopping. I'm not sure why the wiggle stops after a while. Once it starts to go towards infinity, I guess it starts to stop for the rest of the letters, and I'm not sure why. But the important thing is what I have done has fixed it. So here is the wiggle now, and I think it has been worth it. And here are a few different effects that I've added that I just think really work for the game and the story overall that I'm really happy with. So yeah, I think it was worth adding the wiggle effect. Moral of the story though is that maybe design things on paper first to make sure they work and that you're not missing out on any silly maths problems with your mind. Because I'm pretty sure this was just a case of I am ignoring a silly maths problem with my brain. While as if I had it out on paper in front of me, I would not be missing the silly maths problem with my brain. So I hope you enjoyed this little look in on some of my buggy adventures. Hopefully you can relate, and I'm not the only one creating these kind of silly bugs that go on for days that are just things that I could have avoided in the first place. So I'm sure we all go through it. So if you enjoyed this video, then like and comment your own buggy adventures as well if you like, and subscribe, and hopefully I will see you again soon.